Tonight on 24, Trump says the agreement with Iran to end the war is almost final, and the U.S. will enter Iran to receive uranium stockpiles. According to the U.S. president, Tehran has agreed to indefinitely abandon enrichment, and he emphasized that no money will be given to Tehran to reach the agreement. IRGC-affiliated media, like Fars, criticize Iranian officials' silence and demand explanations after Araghchi announced the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz.
We welcome the ceasefire between Iran and the U.S.
And the Paris meeting with dozens of countries present for the return of security to the Strait of Hormuz. The French president says the proposed mission in this waterway is defensive in nature. From the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad. Hello and good evening to Iran International viewers in Iran and around the world. The U.S. president has said the Islamic Republic has agreed to indefinitely halt its nuclear program. According to Trump, the United States will cooperate with the Islamic Republic to collect and transfer enriched uranium to the U.S. He says that until the agreement with Tehran is fully finalized, the naval blockade of Iran will be maintained. Donald Trump emphasized that the agreement to end the war is almost finalized, and no financial exchange is planned between the two sides for this agreement. Prior to these remarks, Iran's foreign minister stated the Strait of Hormuz is completely open for all commercial ships until the ceasefire ends. My colleague Samira Garai joins us from the White House in Washington, D.C. Samira, if we take Mr. Trump's words as the standard, it seems from his perspective the work is done.
The way he has written on his social media accounts recently, and the specific series of posts he has published, all clearly indicate that something significant has happened behind the scenes. For Mr. Trump, and within the context of Mr. Trump's world, a major agreement has officially been reached. In fact, Mr. Trump enthusiastically says today is a fantastic day for the whole world. Furthermore, Mr. Trump is actively thanking Pakistan. He is extending his gratitude to the president of Pakistan and the chief of staff of their armed forces. Additionally, he is praising the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia for their remarkable courage and the invaluable help they've given the United States. And based on everything he wrote since this morning, after Mr. Araghchi's tweet, it seems Mr. Trump believes an agreement has been reached. It's not 100% yet. Mr. Trump expects them to reach that 100% stage very quickly. He says all the provisions they have in mind have been put up for negotiation. I mean, he says it's been negotiated. They've talked. Mr. Trump doesn't say whether the other side has accepted or not, but he says we've talked about those provisions. There's the issue of the Strait of Hormuz. At first, Mr. Araghchi came and wrote a tweet saying the Strait of Hormuz is fully open to all maritime traffic, and tankers, ships, vessels must pass through the routes that the Islamic Republic and the Islamic Republic's shipping authority have designated. This is exactly what we had even when the Strait of Hormuz was closed. We know the Islamic Republic closed the usual route with actions including perhaps mining. It would guide tankers and ships, bringing them entirely through other routes into its own waters, around its own islands, specifically Lyric Island. It would collect holes from some there and allow them to exit. What Mr. Araghchi is saying at the end of his tweet is exactly this. They must take the route that the Islamic Republic has designated. But this writing that came, Mr. Trump immediately picked it up and wrote that the Strait of Hormuz is fully open, which affected oil prices. Brent crude oil prices dropped 11% in just the past hour after these events, and then a series of other tweets came out. Regarding mine clearing, he said, "We did or are doing mine clearing in cooperation with the Islamic Republic. The timing of this wasn't clear again. Worse, he came in a phone call with reporters. Mr. Trump isn't here right now. He's in Arizona. In a phone call with reporters, he said that even that uranium that's buried right now, which Mr. Trump calls dust, nuclear dust, because he says we went and hit these with B-2s and destroyed them. He says these have turned into dust. He says we're going to go, with the help of the Islamic Republic, excavate them with heavy machinery, bring them out and bring them to the United States. He says that the Islamic Republic has totally agreed to stop enrichment. The time frame isn't even an issue. We had previously heard in reports that a 20-year discussion was on the table, specifically 20 years for the United States and a single-digit number for the Islamic Republic. Mr. Trump said yesterday that 20 years isn't real, and today he says they've agreed to completely set aside enrichment without any limitations. And regarding the money for that that varied uranium. Reports have been published. Specifically, Axios Fardad came out with a report talking about a 3-page agreement, and he says they're currently talking about $20 billion, where the United States would release $20 billion of Iran's frozen assets, and in return, it would want to receive that uranium. This is the vibe Mr. Trump and the White House have right now. They believe an agreement will be reached very quickly in the next few days, maybe 2 or 3 days. The second round of negotiations might be held in Islamabad on Sunday, and Mr. Trump seems to be going to welcome it.
توافق 3 صفحه‌ای صحبت میکنه و میگه اینها الان راجع به 20 میلیارد دلار دارن صحبت میکنن که ایالات متحده 20 میلیارد دلار از پولهای بلوکه شده ایران رو آزاد بکنه و در ازاش اون اورانیوم رو بخواد دریافت بکنه. این حال و هوایی هست که الان آقای ترامپ داره، کاخ سفید داره، معتقده در چند روز آینده، خیلی سریع 2-3 روز آینده توافق به دست خواهد آمد. ممکنه روز یکشنبه دور دوم مذاکرات بخواد در اسلام آباد برگزار بشه و آقای ترامپ به نظر میرسه که به استقبالش داره میره.
Thank you, Samira Gorai, with us from the White House in Washington, D.C. Fereshteh Pezeshk, an international relations expert, has also joined us from the U.S. Capitol. Ms. Pezeshk, if it were just Mr. Trump's messages and words, one could say maybe it's rhetoric, but this is simultaneous with Abbas Araghchi's tweet, who said the Persian Gulf waterway, the Strait of Hormuz waterway, is now open to all ships worldwide. It seems like we're really getting close to an agreement, right?
Look, I think the sound and picture still don't quite match up. I mean, it's true that the voices coming out are a bit more in tune with each other, but I think we need to see if the Islamic Republic, these people who are currently negotiating, and it seems Mr. Ghalibaf is leading them, actually have the ability to deliver on these demands. Meaning, if what Mr. Trump is saying is accurate and correct, then the Islamic Republic has conceded to America's maximalist demands. This means that the Islamic Republic that remains after this agreement won't be the same old Islamic Republic, and it's expected that Mr. Trump has been after this all along. He's talked about Venezuela many times. We know this is what he wants. But within the Islamic Republic, those vested interest groups who were benefiting from the current situation, from the sanctions, from the nuclear industry, from the missile industry, that ideologically loyal segment of the government, will this negotiating group, whoever is behind the scenes supporting them or not supporting them, will they be able to control the other factions and deliver on these promises? These, I think, are the questions where the specific details will be crucial, and questions for which we really do not have concrete answers right now. We will have to see if such a diplomatic agreement actually takes shape, and what the final terms of the agreement are. At least based on the latest news, both sides seem quite optimistic. However, on the ground, you still see heavy equipment deployments continuing without pause. Furthermore, they just started the naval blockade a few days ago. It's not like a naval blockade yields results in just a few days. Economic pressure takes time. So there's still a bit of a gap between the sound and the picture, but I also think, at least in terms of rhetoric, both sides' tones are closer. We'll have to see.
کم هنوز بین صدا و تصویر فاصله هست، ولی منم فکر می‌کنم لااقل در صدا دو طرف لحنشون به هم نزدیک‌تره. باید دید.
Inside Iran, the rifts have become very clear and evident. Hardline news agencies close to the Revolutionary Guard, like Tasnim and Fars, are practically reacting against Abbas Araghchi's tweet. A number of parliamentary representatives are also doing the same. If this agreement, with the specificities being described, really comes to fruition, how much difficulty do you think Ghalibaf's team will face within the government?
This is exactly what I said. We'll have to see if they even have the ability to deliver, or what kind of political support they're going to get. We need to see how they're going to go make an agreement, come back, and survive after this. Because, well, there's a fierce power struggle going on behind the scenes. And, well, it's not even the time anymore to address things as they were when Ali Khamenei was alive, for them to be able to make that heroic turnaround. I really don't know if those who remained inside the Islamic Republic are controllable or not. But, well, one must wonder what happens next. Another option, is that if the agreement actually happens and some folks deliberately try to throw a wrench in the works, they'll also be gradually removed from the picture. I think we really have to see if they gradually try to control these dissenting voices on the ground, or if, we might completely face a very different situation in just 3 days' time. In previous negotiation rounds, these conflicting reports kept coming out constantly, saying they were close to a final deal, or that they'd reached some concrete results, largely because the news is still really, really contradictory. I mean, regarding the clauses of the agreement, what the Iranian side says differs from what the American side says, according to reports from informed sources. So I think we'll have to see just how firm and steadfast the one who's left is in their commitment to work with America. Because, reaching a comprehensive agreement like this, you could expect it to be similar to the Gaza peace plan. Other regional countries are also involved, So it is not just an American issue. Everyone is supposed to reach an agreement and take pictures together later. But if such a thing happens, could other countries or groups eliminate political opponents of the agreement? Or will they also become victims, pushing us toward even more conflict or a continued economic blockade? I'm still saying the overall situation is so profoundly chaotic and vague that one really can't speak with complete certainty about the outcome. However, the specific groups that oppose the new agreement are being incredibly loud right now, and their highly aggressive rhetoric could actually be a revealing sign that they are secretly worried that they are rapidly losing their grip on political power.
Thanks, Fardad Farahzad, international relations expert. Regarding the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz by the Islamic Republic, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson has said that Tehran has not had a new agreement with the U.S., and the temporary and conditional reopening of the Strait of Hormuz was based on the 8th April ceasefire understanding. According to Ismail Baghai, if the naval blockade continues, the Islamic Republic will reciprocally take the necessary actions. The explanation from Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson comes while, in past hours, as mentioned, media outlets close to the IRGC, including Fars and Tasnim, had criticized the silence of Islamic Republic officials regarding the agreement with the U.S. These media outlets did not explain that Islamic Republic officials consider the negotiation process with the U.S. to be vague and a cause for concern. Jamshid Barzegar, journalist and political analyst from Toronto, has joined us. Mr. Barzegar, if an agreement really takes place in the coming days, as it seems, can this be translated as a Kalibov coup within the establishment?
Greetings to you. Look, recently a prominent channel associated with Saeed Jalili made a rather unexpected move. Jalili, as you may know, is widely considered to be one of the most uncompromising hardline figures within the Islamic Republic. By chance, he was also a fierce and deeply bitter electoral rival of Kalibaf during the highly controversial events of that so-called last presidential election. This specific channel published a tweet that was incredibly interesting and revealing in its own unique way. In that post, it was explicitly written that the leadership, specifically meaning Mujtaba Khamenei, should step forward and at least publish some undeniable form of direct communication. According to him, whether through a voice message, audio recording, or a clear video statement, he must issue a definitive order regarding this agreement, in which case absolutely everyone would unquestionably obey it. Otherwise, what has actually happened, according to the narrative presented by this specific Twitter account, is the dangerous sedition of high-ranking officials, and in fact, a coordinated conspiracy by, according to him, the coup plotter. Interestingly, no specific individual's name was ever explicitly mentioned in the post. Of course, this controversial tweet was swiftly deleted shortly after publication. However, the political backlash was already underway. Besides conservative Saeed Jalili, numerous others, including Ezatollah Zarghami, a former IRGC commander and former head of IRIB, and figures like Raifi Pour, who represent a wide spectrum of hardline ideological groups within the Islamic Republic, severely criticized it. Even major media outlets directly affiliated with the Revolutionary Guard, as you mentioned, for example, Fars News Agency and Tasnim News Agency, severely criticized about. One of the prominent parliament members had explicitly stated in this regard that if it weren't for the pressing issue of the ongoing war and the necessity for national unity, the legislative body would have undoubtedly impeached Araghchi. This frustration stems from the fact that this is not the first time that at a highly critical juncture and in a completely sensitive geopolitical situation, he hastily makes statements or publishes tweets that inadvertently bring calm to the global oil and energy market. A prime example occurred just as with a controversial tweet Araghchi published regarding the full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Shortly after it was posted, this assurance was directly confirmed by Trump. Consequently, the international oil market immediately witnessed a remarkably sharp drop in crude oil prices. In fact, it suddenly dropped by a staggering 11%, exactly as Samira noted. Brent crude oil price reached $88 per barrel, which is the lowest oil price in the past 5 weeks. And this, well, brings a lot of calm to the energy and oil market. And this is not something that at least a spectrum of forces in the Islamic Republic would want. However, the fundamental issue at hand is that we are currently facing a deep power vacuum and a highly vague political picture. The generalities we know are that senior IRGC commanders have practically taken complete control of state affairs. Furthermore, there is absolutely no news from Mujtaba Khamenei. This profound silence has gone so far that even someone like Saeed Jalili publicly called for the release of at least his audio or video message, although this tweet was quickly deleted again. I mean, this unsettling ambiguity now exists for many internal forces. Consequently, protests have been raised in recent days, and even today, by those very fire-at-will groups. However, I think these, well, compared to the Revolutionary Guard, which has general control over these forces, won't have much of a role. Or say, the general picture that's currently being seen is that both sides are moving towards an agreement where, at least according to Trump's statements, the scales are tipped in America's favor. I mean, what Trump is saying, of course, by setting aside two major issues here, which we saw today, Mr. Trump didn't even talk about. One critical matter is the issue of the Islamic Republic's advancing missile capabilities and its ballistic missile programs. The other pressing concern is the issue of its regional proxy forces. They have kept those specific topics largely silent in recent discussions, but Donald Trump is now saying that unlimited uranium enrichment in Iran will be decisively stopped. Under this plan, previously enriched uranium with direct U.S. cooperation will be recovered directly from Iranian soil and transferred to the U.S. In return for this action, absolutely no money will be exchanged. This firm position is entirely contrary to a recent report by Axios, claiming that at least $20 billion. And another issue was the passage and transit through the Strait of Hormuz, which practically seems to have reopened, and now reports have been published about the movement of Western ships and oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz. So while there is a disagreement within the Islamic Republic, if we compare these disagreements with the past, they are considerably less significant, given the type and extent of concessions being made. It is certainly true that there are ongoing criticisms, but these objections currently sound more like disorganized grumbling and complaining. It seems quite evident that the negotiating team, and at its head, the powerful Revolutionary Guard, at least for now, firmly holds the reins of power. Whether it will actually succeed in advancing this complex agenda in the future or not remains a significant question. Another highly important point to consider is that the Islamic Republic has actively tried to claim full credit for the recent ceasefire in Lebanon. They have deliberately linked this diplomatic development to a direct military threat, claiming that the Islamic Republic had explicitly warned it was going to launch a massive missile attack on Israel last night at exactly 8 p.m. if this ceasefire wasn't urgently established. Now that a truce has indeed been established, the Islamic Republic is publicly portraying this outcome as a great strategic success in this regard. Of course, Donald Trump has firmly rejected this narrative, categorically stating there is absolutely no connection between any purported agreement with the Islamic Republic and the resulting peace in Lebanon. Anyway, although there are many ambiguities remaining, it seems both sides are moving towards a final agreement.
Thank you, Jamshid Barzigar, journalist and political analyst from Toronto. An hour ago, coinciding with Tehran's announcement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a meeting was held in Paris, with dozens of countries present, hosted by the French president and the British prime minister, regarding maritime security in the Persian Gulf. The French president, welcoming the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, said Paris's proposed mission for ensuring maritime security is purely defensive and is limited to non-involved countries. According to Emmanuel Macron, the widespread implementation of this plan depends on improving the region's security conditions.
Insurers.
We are working closely with ship owners, insurance companies, and other entities to create conditions so that traffic can resume as quickly as possible, and we support what the International Maritime Organization has presented for these objectives to be achieved, and also to intensify and improve the program we have started in coordination with Britain so that a mission and conditions are created for them to be neutral and supportive, and to ensure the safety of ship passage in the Persian Gulf. And a planning meeting has taken place in London, and this will continue through diplomatic actions. Furthermore, and continuous strategic coordination will take place with both our American and Israeli partners. As far as France is concerned today, we have proactively taken comprehensive security measures throughout the volatile region to fully protect our citizens, secure our diplomatic missions, and safeguard our essential national interests.
My colleague, Lily Nikfar, has joined us from Brussels. Lily, it's unclear to me exactly what the Europeans have done or what they're going to do, because it doesn't seem like they've had much of an operational role in this complex regional situation up until now.
Individually, they constantly try to clarify that they do not want to be present in this military operation, emphasizing a strictly defensive mission. It involves escorting ships, mine clearance, and providing intelligence or satellite data. However, the mission still lacks clear command and a regular framework. They continuously announce that this is solely intended for after the reopening, following de-escalation or the reduction of overall tensions. But it still has no clear command nor a regular framework, and they were constantly announcing that this is solely for after the reopening, and solely for after the de-escalation or reduction of tensions. And yet, at the very exact moment they were sitting in the meeting, it was officially announced that the Strait of Hormuz had already been reopened by the Islamic Republic, and with the approval of the United States. Surprisingly, this action had been completely finalized while they were still actively deliberating on the matter. They immediately came out of the meeting and said that, well, we urgently need to speed things up so we can operate militarily with greater efficiency. That is exactly why, next week, they want to hold another round of this very meeting in London to finalize their plans. But like generally, if we really want to talk about this meeting and its broad participants and composition, a wide variety of countries, spanning from New Zealand to Canada, as well as India, South Korea, and the Persian Gulf region, were actively present at this gathering. However, despite this large turnout, Christarme says only 12 countries have so far announced their official readiness to participate in any future mission, if there is one. The question for the media and security experts is really, how much can Europeans even carry out such an operation, create such a mission, and have it be successful without the presence of the United States? These are the questions being raised. Mr. Friedrich Merz himself today, at the end of this meeting, which was a press conference, actually pointed out that for his country to be able to participate in this mission, it requires the German parliament and government at the federal level to approve it. Furthermore, he added that if the United States had actively participated in this strategic mission, it would have been highly desirable for his government and for his country, meaning there is a distinct chance that due to America's noticeable absence, the German parliament might not even allow the country to participate. These are the critical questions currently being raised, alongside the fact that the European Union also says that, if possible, it wants to officially extend its defensive shipping mission, called ESPIES, to ensure maritime security in the Strait of Hormuz as well. And just last month, the European Union was ultimately unsuccessful in securing all of the required votes from its 27 member countries to properly authorize such a mission.
Thanks to Lily Nikfar from Brussels for joining us. After the 40-day halt in U.S. and Israeli attacks on Islamic Republic positions, assessments show that direct damages from the widespread internet shutdown are between $37 to $42 million daily, which in total over more than 5 weeks has reached about $1.5 to $2.5 billion. Meanwhile, the Iranian government spokesperson says war damages to the country's economy have reached about $270 billion. The New York Times, however, says that according to initial estimates, this damage is about $300 billion or even more, because all the indirect consequences of the war haven't been calculated yet. Consequences that also include long-term effects like reduced investment, currency depreciation, and capital flight. According to reports, per capita damages are estimated at about $1,600 to $3,250 per person, meaning if the total damage is divided among the population, the approximate share of each Iranian falls within this range. Considering that the average monthly income is between $150 to $200, this figure is even more than a whole year's income for many people. Sarah Bazubandi, an economic expert, has joined us from our other studio in Washington. Ms. Bazubandi, the flames of war haven't completely died down yet, and these are just initial estimates. How much time do you think will be needed, even if an agreement is reached, to rebuild everything that has been lost? Rebuilding everything that has been lost, and especially restoring the economic incomes of many whose businesses largely depended on the internet.
Look, even according to officials of the Islamic Republic government themselves, like Mr. Pezeshkian, for example, they have admitted it will take at least 10 to 12 years for the country to get back to where it was just 40 days ago. If you look at all the statistics right now, this week in Washington marks the World Bank and International Monetary Fund meetings, and all the economic reports these two institutions have published for this current fiscal year period clearly reflect this ongoing crisis. Experts are predicting that Iran will not only continue to suffer from the negative economic growth, which it already had, but that this decline will become even more severely negative after the war. Furthermore, due to crippling severe inflation, the country's economy will experience, a contractionary slowdown or deep stagflation. Ultimately, these numbers and figures you have referred to are multiple predictions by various institutions made entirely remotely and with considerable speculation. But in my opinion, what is actually happening on the ground is much more complicated than this. Surface-level analysis suggests this is because many of the country's official economic entities, like, for example, state-backed pension funds and commercial banks, were already facing very severe and deeply entrenched financial crises long before the war even began. Now, trapped in this devastating situation, their structural conditions will undoubtedly become much worse, risking a complete institutional collapse. To put the resulting financial hardship into perspective, the World Bank has announced that the poverty line globally is about $8.30 in daily income, a threshold many more will soon fall beneath. And according to that prediction, if we calculate it with, say, 150,000 Toman dollar, it might be something around 40 million per month, meaning anyone in Iran earning less than 40 million per month is living below the World Bank's poverty line. According to what the World Bank announces, it says more than 33 million Iranians are currently below the poverty line. I believe it will be even more than that. Now, just imagine in an economic situation where economic growth is negative, inflation is extremely high, and at least 1/3 of the country's population is living below the poverty line. These current pressures from the internet shutdown have caused a large portion of informal economic activities, like these home-based economic activities, small businesses that offer their services through social media, or, for example, by mail, to be disconnected from the internet. All of these hard-working individuals haven't had a single penny of income for over 40 excruciating days now. So now, in these dire circumstances, just imagine what the daily survival situation will be like for ordinary people. Naturally, the entire country's vital infrastructure has suffered severe, lasting damage. About 70 to 80% of the country's crucial steel production sector is completely gone. Similarly, 70 to 80% of the country's petrochemical industry is gone. Major refineries were severely damaged. Furthermore, transportation, especially the national air transportation system, is severely damaged today. I mean, the air transportation sector, which was already struggling immensely under intense international sanctions pressure, with its so-called very old, outdated, and incomplete fleet of aircraft, has now been completely grounded. Traditionally, their absolute peak period of travel and activity was during the annual Nowruz holidays. However, during these most recent Nowruz holidays, absolutely no flights happened at all. All domestic airlines have been rendered completely out of service, leaving countless travelers stranded and disrupting vital supply lines. Furthermore, a significant number of these already scarce planes were severely damaged in the recent attacks on various transportation hubs. Numerous airports, historically vital civilian airports that serve the general public, were heavily damaged and left practically non-functional. If we put all of these catastrophic factors together, in my opinion, it clearly shows that there is a very long and difficult road ahead for rebuilding the country, even if this fragile current ceasefire continues.
Ms. Bazubandi, we have very little time left. There are also many lingering ambiguities about the outlook after a potential agreement. Is it possible, as Jede Vos, Mr. Trump's deputy, stated, that Iran might finally connect to the global economy, reduce its hostility towards the world, and benefit from foreign investment? Or do you think that even after an agreement, we'll simply see another major wave of migration, involving both human migration and capital flight?
I think the real main answer to this is actually in the hands of the Islamic Republic's negotiators. But, well, anyway, if we look at the Islamic Republic's track record so far, we see that almost always these kinds of negotiations have, in a way, been a from one pillar to another, there is salvation situation for the Islamic Republic. Now, they'll bring back some of the frozen assets from abroad, and they'll rebuild themselves and their so-called military, security, and cyber infrastructures. As for the everyday citizens, the government simply will not prioritize their needs in this strategic planning. Realistically, this will only shift if a fundamental structural transformation occurs within the country's domestic and foreign policies. Unfortunately, I do not foresee such profound changes in the Islamic Republic's immediate future, though I sincerely hope I am wrong and that it actually happens.
Thank you, Sarah Bazubandi, economic expert from our studio in Washington. Yesterday, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security told Iran International that the reason for the arrest of Youssef Azizi, one of the pro-Islamic Republic experts in the media, was providing false information for a U.S. visa application and denying his membership in the Basij organization. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security emphasized in its statement that there's no place for supporters of terrorism in the United States. Meanwhile, in recent weeks, several other children and relatives of Islamic Republic officials, including Isa Hashimi, son of Masoumeh Aktaqat, two relatives of Qasem Soleimani, and Ali Larijani's daughter, were arrested in the U.S. Arash Aramesh, lawyer and national security expert from Washington, is with us. Mr. Aramesh, thank you for accepting our invitation. I know that such expulsions and restrictions for relatives of Islamic Republic officials or supporters of the Islamic Republic bring joy to many opponents of the Islamic Republic. But from a legal perspective, does the U.S. government have a basis for such expulsions?
We essentially have three different categories to consider. For those who are actual US citizens, it is by far the hardest process. You literally have to take a matter to court. You cannot just revoke citizenship en masse like that. The second group consists of individuals who currently hold green cards or permanent residency.
Do we even have a contemporary example of someone's citizenship being revoked?
In contemporary history, I'm thinking, now there have been a few isolated cases in recent decades where citizenship was actually taken to court and revoked for aiding the enemy. But in contemporary history overall, I'm thinking no. Well, if they knew, I would have definitely looked into this specific question. But generally, it's really hard to legally revoke citizenship, whether you were naturally born here or you're a naturalized citizen, meaning you were born here but you took a formal oath and became a citizen. Revoking that is very difficult. And these casual talks they have, like deport so-and-so, a citizen, they're a legal citizen of the country. If you live under the shadow of this US flag and enjoy and use these very freedoms, while one of them is that your citizenship, which the 14th Amendment of the Constitution guarantees and ensures all your civil rights, this must be protected. Now we have two other groups. So, citizenship is really hard. The second group are those who have green cards. Having a green card is not a right. It's considered a privilege or an advantage. But again, if you want to revoke someone's green card, this also. Yes, I'm certainly not an immigration lawyer, but I'm explaining this to you from the perspective of constitutional laws and a broader framework of the US Constitution. It is that there are several specific legal bases, if you will, based on which you can, actually revoke someone's permanent resident green card. One reason is committing a serious crime, committing specific types of severe crimes. For example, if they commit a very massive, brutal, and major violent crime. Another one is immigration fraud, meaning intentional fraud in the formal immigration process. Another one is that they pose a national security risk, threatening national security. But all of these also require that first they arrest the person, but then they go before an immigration judge. I mean, they tell them up front. We have a concept in US law called due process. Due process means not only that the law itself is fair, but also that the way the law is executed is fair. You can't just grab someone in the middle of the street, pick them up, and, kick them out of the country, so to speak. Due process means even the person you think is a criminal, even if they're a heinous criminal. But ultimately, how do you know? The law must give them the right to go before a judge. So what's the deal? Even someone who has a green card, if the government says based on this, there's a national security risk or they've made a fraudulent lie in their immigration file, they ultimately have to go before a judge. But the government wins most of these cases. The fact that they say this dear gentleman came and didn't write in his application or that immigration document that he was a Basij member, well, that's enough right there. After all, the Basij is a direct subset of the IRGC, and the IRGC is a designated terrorist organization. But the mere fact remains, and the third group I wanted to mention are those who currently hold visas. Visas of any kind, whether student, tourist, or pilgrimage. That status is completely revocable, meaning, as they say, the State Department can revoke it upon demand without prior warning. So it's visas, green cards, and citizenship. The way to revoke these becomes progressively harder and harder as you go up these steps. Now, come and say so-and-so has such and such an opinion, or so-and-so said such and such a thing, and based on that, they want to revoke their green card? No. In the United States, you have the right to even be a supporter, even an open and active supporter, meaning you can come and say, hey, I support this, wave the Al-Qaeda flag, wave the ISIS flag in the street. There's no problem with that. But if you come and at-chased on that, oh, I'm sorry, by at I meant you hold a flag, do symbolic things. You're symbolically a supporter of the Nazi Party, a supporter of the Communist Party, a supporter of Al-Qaeda. You're a supporter of the Islamic terrorist IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, a supporter of the Islamic Republic, a supporter of anyone. No, that's not considered against the law. But if someone comes and starts recruiting for Al-Qaeda, or God forbid wants to bomb somewhere, that's a different story. So the authorities did not explicitly come out and declare they are revoking so-and-so's green card just because they made a specific controversial statement. But it is not at all unlikely that someone's known political affiliation caused federal investigators to closely re-examine their immigration file. They might look at the record and ask, oh, what kind of persecuted refugee are you when you are actually the nephew of a regime tyrant associated with one of the biggest 3 terrorist groups in the region, like Qasem Soleimani? They will inevitably question, how exactly did you write right here in your official immigration application that you are not a Basij member? Anyway, let's put aside other discussions. After all, his family are members of the regime. His father is an, I don't know, something. This guy's brother, just recently, during the woman life freedom movement by the name of Tawhid Azizi, they had canceled his Twitter account 2 or 3 times because he had openly and directly supported the killing and blinding of people. I think he's also a citizen, this person who also lives in Iran. Yeah, and he's very wicked and repulsive. But he has the right to say these things if he's on American soil. But I'm telling you, it doesn't make his case any better. But this guy wasn't a citizen, so it seems like...
This point you're making about citizens and green card holders, excuse me for interrupting. You, Mr. Armesh, it seems like there are 2 completely different categories, you know? Citizens, who are legal US citizens, it doesn't seem like the government can do much with them. But those who have green cards or visas to be in the US, it seems that the government, at least Mr. Trump's assessment is, yeah, you have freedom of speech. It's the First Amendment. You can say whatever you want. But your presence in America isn't a right. It's a privilege that our government has granted. And for any reason, we can revoke that privilege. How much is this in line with the spirit of the US Constitution?
Well, regarding green cards, they can't just say they want to revoke them for any reason. I'll say it again, revoking them requires a series of due processes, legal steps, and judicial procedures. It doesn't happen overnight.
So, for example, Mr. Rubio has revoked Masume Atakar's son's residency, and he also posted a detailed tweet saying that in 2014, the Obama administration granted him residency based on the diverse immigration law, and now they've revoked his residency. It doesn't seem like there's a very valid reason mentioned in his tweet as to why they're revoking his residency. Is it just because he was the child of one of the Islamic Republic's officials?
Look, this itself also relates to the type of green card, that when they say diversity, they mean the lottery. You know, he had won the lottery. He was saying that he won the lottery and came here, but the Secretary of State, and quite often actually the courts, it seems, because they say this is a foreign policy issue and a visa issue, quite often the courts accept the executive branch's opinion. Look, there's what's in the spirit of the law, and then there's what actually happens. I myself am strongly against illegal immigration. In my opinion, Mr. Biden should have decisively closed this order, this incredibly chaotic southern border, a long time ago. Doing so would have prevented thousands of people from coming in unchecked, but unfortunately he didn't. But on the other hand, they also poured into the streets and did these strange, unsettling things with masks. One day the Constitution, and one day the country's courts, and one day history itself will not look kindly upon this. It remains deeply troubling that in the United States, people were arrested without a warrant and taken away like this. Yes, certainly, 2 wrongs don't make a right. If you actually think today that these actions are good because, for example, heavily armed agents rush in and violently arrest someone who is Salvadoran or from Peru, Mexico, or anywhere else in the world, with masks and without anything, forcibly entering their home without a legal warrant. Look, for those who haven't read the Constitution, go read it. The Constitution doesn't say US citizen, nor does it say US green card holder. It explicitly protects all people, all individuals who are under this flag on this soil, even those who are undocumented. That is precisely why the police can't use unjustified violence or abuse against an undocumented immigrant. That's why they don't even allow local police. And local police are actually, by the way, very well trained in these matters, that they use these ICE officers. Just because the Democrats did something wrong, a very bad thing with open borders, everything's just a mess. We'll close the border, folks. But on the other hand, what he's doing, that's not right. Let's go back to the issue of people who support the Islamic Republic or Hamas. If the government just and only comes and says, you said this, and because of what you said, I want to fire you, that's a violation of the Constitution. But, it doesn't say anything like that. It comes and says, okay, you support Hamas, fine, but I saw you lied in your immigration file too, so goodbye. People like Mr. Azizi, those who were Basij members, well, they eventually lied too, and now that's, been exposed.
Thank you, Arash Aramesh, Washington lawyer and national security expert. Recently, Penguin Publishing has, published a collection of short stories by 34 renowned authors from around the world, including Salman Rushdie and Haruki Murakami. In this collection, there's also a work called 48 Steps, written by Paxima Majozi, a writer, journalist, and member of the Iran International editorial team. Let's watch a report from Artavan Ruzve about the book launch ceremony.
The famous bookstore right here in the heart of Washington, D.C. is, proudly holding an exciting book launch today, Thursday. They are celebrating a newly released anthology titled International Short Stories, thanks to the renowned Penguin Publishing. This major Penguin Publishing book tour is, currently being held in various cultural hubs across the United States, and today it's finally here. Exactly 34 diverse literary works are the final selections that, have been carefully included in this impressive book. Fascinatingly, there's also a prominent Iranian name among them. Paxima Majozi is a talented Iranian journalist with a doctorate in literature. She is the author of this featured story, whose work has been published alongside, other celebrated global authors. Extremely familiar names, such as Salman Rushdie and Haruki Murakami, are among those who, have beautifully crafted stories within this collection. What a strange voice. Or perhaps, what a familiar voice. We climb 48 steps. We're facing a faded door that was once blue, and now they open the door. The blue flames of the heater are, the only light in the house. Paxima is, telling and narrating parts of her story in today's program, for those who are interested in hearing her stories.
Having a story originating from Iran and now realizing that this story is mine, featured in this collection, is something I think is a truly good thing. It perhaps opens a vital way for the world to, better understand and appreciate Iranian literature, especially given all the severe censorship and relentless pressures currently imposed on Iranian writers. This story, to be completely honest, isn't a direct personal experience of mine, but perhaps we can say it's a profound, shared, and lived experience. Maybe it's directly derived from those courageous, tradition-breaking acts that Iranian women started so many years ago, and we're still actively witnessing the continuation of that powerful path today.
How she said
the way she had, arranged those sentences one by one was fascinating. I had never, encountered anything like that. I also like the story because it never lets you figure out if what's happening is real or, in his mind. And this constant tension between these two, whether he or she is living it or thinking it, I think, worked incredibly well in the story.
Recently, Penguin Publishing proudly unveiled a highly anticipated new collection of international short stories during a special literary event held here in Washington, D.C. Among the notable works featured in this global anthology is 48 Steps, a compelling piece penned by acclaimed Iranian journalist and writer Paxima Majozi. Reporting from Washington, D.C., this is Artavan Ruzve.
Well, before the end of our program today, we have a short opportunity to see live images of commercial cargo ships and heavy oil tankers being monitored closely in the strategic Strait of Hormuz. As you can see, the Strait of Hormuz itself is still remaining more or less quiet right now. However, in the past few hours, the Islamic Republic's Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, has publicly stated that now this crucial strait is officially open to all ships in the world. The US government has also said that this remains the case, except for the ongoing blockade of Iranian maritime ports. In the past few minutes, the Wall Street Journal, quoting senior Trump administration officials, has reported that the next round of crucial negotiations is likely to take place this Monday in Pakistan. Thank you for joining us today. You can watch the entire program again a bit later on Iran International's official YouTube channel.